Now let's take a look at something I like to call morphing between the samples. And we've called up a patch here called the 707 Morph. First I'm going to turn down our CV coming in here. That is controlling the mix between the two different snare drums of the 707 drum machine. This controls the mix between the two voices, so it's being summed with this CV. So when we're here, we're going to hear one of the 707 snare drums. When we put it right in the middle, we're going to hear the other one. And we can mix between those. And as we go farther than the middle point, it's going to mix back to this one. So that is the same as that setting. So we've got 707 snare 1 assigned to voice 1, 707 snare 2 assigned to voice 2. Now let's look at our modulation section. So we're using amplitude modulation of voice 1 using modulation oscillator 1. And we're doing the same thing with modulation oscillator 2 for voice 2. Let's go look at these modulation oscillators. So we've got a triangle waveform set up. Frequency is set at 0, which means it's not going to be oscillating. We've got knob 2 assigned to the modulation source. That's for the frequency. And mod amount. So this is going to be controlling the frequency of our amplitude modulation. We can see phase sync is on. And this one has a phase of 270. So that means when the voice starts, it's actually going to be turned all the way off, and it's going to fade up into that based on the frequency of that modulation oscillator. We can see here we're adjusting the phase of that modulation oscillator with CV1 added to knob 1. So as we move this through here, we'll go back here, it's just like us moving the start point from here to here or wherever. I'm going to go ahead and put it back to 270. And let's go look at oscillator 2 because we're using it to amplitude modulate a sample 2. So again, it's set to a triangle. Its frequency is set to 0. Knob 2 is controlling the frequency. Mod amount is set to 23. That's exactly identical to modulation oscillator 1 settings. Phase sync is set to on as well. And now we see the phase is set to 89. I'm going to go ahead and set it to 90. So modulation oscillator 1 was set to a phase of 270. This is set to 90. So now when the sound starts, this sound is going to play loud and then get quieter based on the frequency of our modulation oscillator. So basically, modulation oscillators 1 and 2 are playing the exact same pitch. They're both being controlled in the same way with the same knobs. The phase of each waveform is 180 degrees out of phase, and that is what's going to make it unique. So let's listen to our sound here. So we're fading here. So we're moving our sync point of phase in each modulation oscillator. So as we move it here, one waveform is completely out of phase, the other one is in phase with the peak, and then this is controlling the frequency of that modulation oscillator, or both of them. And when they're at 0, that means this one's always going to be high and this one's always going to be low. But as we start turning this up, let's have a listen to that. Let's listen to it here. Essentially what you've got is two VCAs mixing from one voice into the other at this rate. So the initial attack is coming from one sound based on this or this, and then we're fading in between the two at various rates. First we're starting out at a rate of 0, so they're not moving at all. Then we're increasing that rate, and then we're going a little bit into the audio rate. And also we can offset those start points with this. And notice the higher settings kind of give us a little bit of a flam effect. Now I believe we also have our CV set up to do this knob motion for us, so we can give a little animation to that. There it's mixing between the two samples because our frequency is all the way down. Now we could go ahead and select some different samples to try that same effect too. Let's try, here's a 505 hat, and let's try something over here. Okay, so here we've got the ride here, and we're fading into an open hat. So as we increase this, you should hear the tail end start to turn into the open hat. Now if we mix this over, we'll start out with the open hat, and now it's fading into the ride. So we have the initial attack from the hat and the tail from the ride, or we could mix and reverse that effect. And the frequency that all that happens at, you kind of have to fine tune it. Let's try the 909 ride. So there's ride 1. Let's go here to ride 2. Be sure to play with selecting different waveforms as too. You might like the sine wave, you might like the rounded square wave. This is going to cause more abrupt changes between morphing between the two parameters. Let's go ahead, oscillator 2, and let's try some more samples. One kick drum, the other kick drum. Now let's mix or morph those two. So that's a really cool tool to vary the tone and mix between two different voices. It really kind of works good when they're similar voices but have enough difference that you can really tell when they are mixing or morphing together.